Welcome to Xhibition, an Xbox podcast, episode 4. My name is Samuel Adams, and we have a very big show to dive into today because we are just 1 week away from E3 2021. In fact, by the time you are watching this, I'm recording on Saturday, the show goes live every single Sunday. We are actually less than 1 week away from E3 2021, and on top of that, things really get started a bit earlier with the Summer Game Fest, which kicks off on June 10th. A lot of big news coming out over the course of the next week or week and a half, so stay tuned. The next few episodes are going to be absolutely packed. On top of that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you missed last week's episode of the show, I was joined by IGN's Chris Shriver to discuss more of what we would want to see from E3 2021. You can check out his episode last week. Very good conversation that we had. And in a couple of weeks, I've got some more guests that are coming on to share their thoughts after E3 2021. We'll talk about that more in the future. But let's go ahead and give a high-level overview of who you can expect to see and when you can expect to see them, because we now have a general outline of what days will host what press conferences. I say it's a general outline because this year's show feels very disorganized. And I say that with as much kindness and compassion as I can, but it's the week before E3, and I still don't know what time people like Gearbox and Devolver Digital are holding their show. That's pretty massive. And on top of that, there are some of these names that are being thrown around where we're not sure if they're being baked into an E3 broadcast like a pre-show, or if they are something that is its own entity that is going to be doing their own unique press conference. It's just very reactionary from the ESA. Normally, in a traditional year with an E3, the ESA releases an entire schedule and the publishers and developers kind of abide by that. Now it's been flipped on its head where the publishers and developers say something and then E3 just kind of updates their schedule, which is fine. It just stresses me out because I want to be able to plan for these things and to be able to watch them. Now, I'll be out of town for most of E3 because I planned in advance to go out of town, and that's perfectly fine because who doesn't love a good vacation? But if you are in town and you're ready to watch some shows, here's when you can expect them. Now, while E3 kicks off on Saturday, June 12th and runs through Tuesday, June 15th, it is worth pointing out that the real summer game news begins with the Summer Game Fest kickoff live event hosted by Geoff Keighley at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, June the 10th. You can tune in there for some inevitable world premieres and plenty of big teases for what is to come. On Saturday, June 12th, you have a lot of big shows, kicking off with the Guerrilla Collective at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by a broadcast pre-show from the E3 team at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and then Ubisoft Forward at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and at a to-be-announced time, Gearbox's press conference and a show from Devolver Digital. So some very big names coming on Saturday, June 12th. On Sunday, June 13th, you have another broadcast pre-show kicking everything off at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by Microsoft's Xbox and Bethesda Games Showcase at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to be the highlight of this year's show, and I'm not just saying that because this is an Xbox press conference. Out of all of the big players in the game, Nintendo does have a direct they're showing on Tuesday, but for big world premieres and announcements and next generation experiences, Microsoft's Xbox and Bethesda Game Showcase is where you'll see a lot of that kind of content. Following that, you have the Square Enix Presents at 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time, and to be announced, you have special presentations from the PC Gaming Show and the Future Games Show. E3 parent company ESA also says that Warner Bros. Games and Back 4 Blood and 24 Entertainment will be featured on the E3 broadcast on Sunday. Monday, June 14th, the show continues. The E3 broadcast pre-show kicks things off at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and to be announced, you have press conferences from several indie developers and presentations from Take-Two Interactive, Mythical Games, Freedom Games, Razer, and Capcom, and Verizon and Intellivision will also be featured, although we are not quite sure how they will be featured right now. Then on Tuesday, June 15th, everything kicks off once again at 11 a.m. Eastern Time with the E3 broadcast pre-show, and at 12 noon, you have Nintendo's Nintendo Direct with roughly 40 minutes of information about upcoming games, followed by a Treehouse Live with about 3 hours of gameplay demoed. And to be announced, you have focused events from Bandai Namco, Eureka Games, and GameSpot, with everything winding up with the official E3 2021 awards show. That is a ton of news to break down, and again, I will have this linked down below from The Verge if you want to see a continually updated resource that can give you the latest times and dates for all of the shows that are going to be hosted. But out of everything, obviously, I'm looking forward to the Microsoft, Xbox, and Bethesda games showcase to see what Obsidian is working on, to see what Halo Infinite looks like now, and of course, to see what surprises Xbox has up their sleeve. Personally, I'm betting big on Game Pass announcements being the star of the show, and on top of that, I think we'll see some kind of hardware update for a streaming stick that a lot of other podcasters and content creators have been discussing, because now that the cloud is able to be streamed to something as simple as Google Chrome on a Chromebook, then why not bring that into the living room and give a dedicated set-top box or something like a Fire Stick that gives streaming capability to the masses without the major investment of $300 to $500 in a gaming console or even more for a high-end gaming PC. Additionally, Forza Horizon 5 absolutely going to be at the show, and I think you will see something about Microsoft Flight Simulator coming to the Xbox Series X and S. It's about time that game finally does launch after it released on PC last summer. And then, as I mentioned previously, Halo Infinite, the latest rumors have that multiplayer is going to be shown off, but we'll see what that looks like when the time does come. Additionally, I'm a huge fan of not only Giancarlo Esposito, but of Far Cry 6, and I cannot wait to see more of that game specifically, but in general, I'm kind of taking a relaxed approach to E3 this year. I'm not doing a ton of coverage on my channel. I'm not going to be making tons of videos throughout the week. I'm going to be enjoying the news. I'm going to be talking about it on Twitter. I'm going to be really taking it all in because it's a very exciting year in the gaming industry. This is when you see next gen begin to hit its stride. We still see a lot of cross-generational games. We talked about that earlier in the week here on the YouTube channel, but there's a lot to look forward to in the years to come. And it all starts with E3 2021. So tune in, get ready, get hyped. A lot of big news coming down the pike. And on top of that, I almost forgot to mention that Persona 5 Royal has been rated for Xbox. So stay tuned for that. I bet that's going to be one of the big announcements from the show. But let's go ahead and dive into some of the biggest gaming news of the week in regards to the games themselves, because Battlefield is officially getting a reveal on June the 9th at 7 a.m. Pacific Time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and that is when we will potentially see Battlefield 6. I say potentially, it is almost definitively Battlefield 6. The name is still up in the air, but it will have that modern setting. We have seen plenty of leaked screenshots, which I'm showing here right now, and in short, it's the Battlefield that I want. While World War I and World War II are fun, they are good settings, they are fun to play, and I like that classic gunplay action, I still want a modern military shooter. I want something that brings me back to Battlefield 3, which is, in my opinion, the peak of Battlefield. I put so much time into Battlefield 3, and Battlefield 4 was good as well. I will say, if you want to set the mood, and you have a Prime subscription on Amazon, Battlefield 4 is currently free with Prime Gaming, so go redeem that. You can dive into the action, and it is still a fantastic time. Plus, when a game is given away for free, we see that Game Pass effect, where more people come into the servers, and it kind of revitalizes that game and brings some of that player base back. Not to say that Battlefield really ever lost any of it, because it's still a very popular game to this day. So once again, Battlefield reveal coming June 9th. This is one of my most anticipated games of the year. It's certainly above Call of Duty, just below Halo Infinite. Very pumped to see what Battlefield brings to the table after the positive reception to Battlefield 5, but lackluster in comparison to years past. Definitely excited to see what they have planned and in store. On top of that, Crysis Remastered, Crysis 2 Remastered, and Crysis 3 Remastered are all coming to consoles and PC this fall. They write on the official Crysis Twitter account, visit the North Korean islands, save humanity from a deadly virus in New York City, and uncover the truth about Cell. The Crysis Remastered trilogy is officially on its way. This is so good to see. It seems like the Crysis Remaster that we saw released a couple of years back, or was it in 2020? Time is nothing but a figment of my imagination at this point. Crysis Remastered seems to have been a test run for the community reception, the community interest in a potential remaster of Crysis. And as Crysis Remastered sold really well, it stands to reason that the Crysis Remastered trilogy was either well on its way or easy enough to go ahead and make happen. I'm personally absolutely picking this one up this year because this is a collection of 3 games that truly do push hardware to its limits. As we all know, the classic saying, "Can it run Crysis?" has been a long-standing staple of the gaming industry, and now we get to see what those remasters look like. They aren't as impressive as a lot of people would want them to be, and I will say that I think that whole "Can it run Crysis" situation is impacted heavily by the nostalgia glasses that we all tend to put on, because graphics have come a very long way, and technology has come a very long way since Crysis was released. And I think that a lot of the modern games that come out today would be the "Can it run Crysis" if we were still in that same time frame. So with that all being said, the remaster looks great. I'm looking forward to seeing Crysis 2 remastered specifically. That's the one that I've spent the most time with. But I'm going to do what a lot of people did with the Mass Effect Legendary Edition and dive into all 3 of these and play them chronologically, because it's just a really good shooter. It's just a fun shooter. And I like that they're keeping a lot of the mechanics the same. You can kind of see that in the gameplay, where it feels like the classic Crysis experience, and I will be getting into that later this holiday season. On top of that, Ghost Runner is getting an upgrade on PS5, Xbox Series X and S on September the 28th, which is very exciting for a lot of fans of Ghost Runner, which is one of the last generation later games that I think was pretty well received, but publisher 505 Games, alongside developers and partners All In Games, One More Level, 3D Realms, and Slipgate Ironworks, announced that the official physical and digital PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S launch date of Ghost Runner, the first-person cyberpunk parkour action game, is coming on Tuesday, September the 28th. If you aren't familiar with the game, Ghost Runner's critically acclaimed, fast-paced cyberpunk action makes the leap into next generation with improved graphics, performance, and awesome new features. Cut through cyborgs while grappling across deadly chasms, post-processing HDR, ray tracing fidelity mode, 3D audio, haptic feedback for PS5, and more are all included in the experience. Split-second reaction timing and impressive modes feels even more impressively aggressive with 4K 120 FPS and instant loading through the power of that SSD. Ghost Runner on next-gen systems launches on Tuesday, September 28th in physical retail stores and digital storefronts for $30, and owners of the Xbox One and PS4 versions can upgrade to their respective new generation console version for free. So, there you have it. That is essentially the rundown for Ghost Runner. This is one that is going to be fun to revisit if you've already gotten into it, and on top of that, this will be one that is worth checking out for the first time with all of those new next generation upgrades. And I love seeing that 4K 120 FPS. That really seals the deal for me. But if you're looking for something to play right now that you don't have to wait for, Game Pass Ultimate subscribers are in luck, because some new additions are coming ahead of E3 2021. And I will say, some people have been complaining this is a bit of a lighter week as compared to months past, with announcements like MLB The Show 21 headlining in a lot of ways for the entire spring season. But keep in mind, again, E3 is on the way. That's where they're going to be showing off the majority of their biggest Game Pass announcements for the summer season. So stay tuned. We are going to be having a lot of news to break down in the show in a week or so. But coming soon to Xbox Game Pass, in fact, a couple of these are out right now. Currently available, you have The Wild at Heart, which is streaming on cloud, and For Honor on cloud and console, with war marching across the lands of Heathmoor as heroes from rival factions clash in unending visceral battles. This is a game that just keeps on going. For Honor has legs. In a way, it's like the medieval combat Rainbow Six Siege. It just continues to get new updates and DLC, and Ubisoft is going to be discussing it during their pre-show before Ubisoft Forward really begins, so it's going to be getting even more updates, and I'm sure you'll see some next generation content information as well. Finally, Backbone comes to PC on June the 8th. Raccoon Detective Howard Loader is not a hero. He can barely make rent, and yet he has stumbled across something so massive that it will shake the very fabric of society. Interesting little detective-style game. But potentially for the rest of you out there, Darkest Dungeon is the biggest edition, jumping to the Game Pass Ultimate subscription on June 10th on cloud, console, and PC. Darkest Dungeon is a challenging gothic roguelike turn-based RPG about the psychological stress of adventuring. So, there you have it. You can check out all of these games available now. We have some very big editions that launched in the past couple of weeks that are out there for you. Maneater comes to mind, Knockout City comes to mind, and on top of that, hundreds of other games available for you. Definitely recommend diving in and checking them out. Now I want to dive into a story that is exclusive to IGN, but a lot of people have begun talking about over the course of the past 24 hours. Xbox Series X. New AMD tech could improve frame rate and resolution even more, and this is about the Fidelity FX Super Resolution technology from AMD. This is marketed as a competitor to NVIDIA's DLSS technology. And so for those that aren't familiar with what this effectively does, it allows your computer or your hardware to do more with less. It's sort of like super sampling, it's sort of like upscaling, but on a larger scale. The difference is that NVIDIA's DLSS uses artificial intelligence to improve your performance. It's more reactionary. It's something that allows some smart choices to be made by the technology itself that creates a better experience for you. AMD's Fidelity FX, as I understand it, is using an algorithm-based model versus AI, so it's much more manual versus something that is automatic. With that manual approach, with that algorithmic approach, there are issues that can arise if it's not optimized beyond belief. We saw a comparison on Twitter, which I will try and find the thread and link it down below, that effectively showed the difference between a game running at 27 frames per second in 4K versus using Fidelity FX running at 4K, and it was getting between about 45 and 60 frames per second, if I remember correctly, so generally doubling the frame rate, but at the cost of clarity within the image itself. Technically still 4K, but clarity was a little bit sacrificed. So, the biggest question here is how optimized can AMD make Fidelity FX Super Resolution in its final state when it hits consoles, if it hits consoles. Let's make that very clear. This is something that I'm sure is still being developed and is in development actively, and research has to be done because you don't want to sacrifice the player experience just for a couple of extra frames. You have to make sure that everything looks solid across the board no matter how it's being done. Certainly not a competitor in my mind to NVIDIA DLSS. It's something that is an alternative depending on what company you want to go with. I still feel like they are very, very different technologies and very, very different entities. I'm not a professional by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not a tech guru, but that is how I understand it. So we'll stay tuned, but it's nice to see both companies going head to head and pushing each other to become better. You see the same thing from Sony and Microsoft. It's important to have competition, and that's effectively what NVIDIA has with AMD. So we'll see what they come up with. During today's show, I also wanted to point out Garrett Atkins on Twitter. You can follow him and check out his content at Garrett E. Atkins. But he says, Xbox Game Pass announcement, welcome to GamePassCounter.com, the most easily accessible and accurate list of Xbox Game Pass games. No ads, no affiliate links, no data collection, just your favorite list of Xbox Game Pass games. Here you have what this actually is. It shows you the entire total of Game Pass games available, 938 total games when other versions are counted, for example, Doom Eternal console versus Doom Eternal on PC. But here's the breakdown across console games, PC games, cloud games, and you can view the entire list as it goes down. So if you just want to see what games are compatible with touch, you can get the entire list right here and see what you want to play on top of that. If you just want console games, here are all of the biggest console games that are out right now that you can check out, and the list just continues. Very useful tool if you want to plan out what you want to play in the months ahead. Backward compatible titles that are available. This is very useful if you have somebody that might be playing on previous generations of hardware. So dive in, check it out, GamePassCounter.com. Fantastic tool that I highly recommend. To round out today's show, we have a bit of a celebration. Minecraft Dungeons is celebrating its first anniversary. Now, before you check out of the show, before you go on to your next podcast or boot up your daily mix on Spotify, whatever you might be doing, hear me out. Minecraft Dungeons is great, and I'll tell you why. Number one, available on Game Pass across all platforms, cloud, console, and PC. Number two, cloud saves are enabled, so you can play wherever you want and whenever you want and take that progress with you. But on top of that, it's the perfect entry into a Diablo-style experience. It is the perfect entry-level dungeon crawler for people like me that can become very overwhelmed by armor and weapons and the different stats that come with this. This is something that is easily understood and that is very accessible, and ultimately it's fun. It's a very, very fun game. Over the course of the past week, I downloaded it on my Xbox Series X and started playing it with my girlfriend. Then I take my progress and I take it on the go with me. I go to my lunch break at work and I start playing on my iPhone via the browser gaming experience that they've released for Xbox Cloud Gaming. After this, I might boot it up on the PC and see how it runs over there, but it's the same exact profile, the same exact progress, and that is all a very fantastic experience. But they've revealed some hard stats to show how the community has built up Minecraft Dungeons and rallied around it over the course of the last year. 11.5 million unique players in 232 countries and territories, and you have a lot of damage done, a lot of damage taken, and a lot of weapon statistics here. I love seeing all of these, and I love this data that they can harvest from these games. Very cool stuff here, so you can check out the entire rundown at Minecraft.net. But again, if you haven't checked out Minecraft Dungeons, don't pass it by just because it's Minecraft, because the experience you get is so different from the traditional Minecraft setup that it's something that if you just want a very light dungeon crawler RPG kind of situation, very fun. You've got ranged, close. It's great. It's a really fun game. Dive in, give it a shot. You probably won't regret it. Can't guarantee you won't regret it. But again, if you have Game Pass Ultimate, no need to regret it, because you just have to install the game and you're ready to go. That wraps up this week's episode of Xhibition, an Xbox podcast. If you enjoy the show and you like what you see or what you hear, hit that subscribe button and stay up to date on youtube.com/JamPackSam or on your podcast service of choice. You can find me across social media at JamPackSam. Hit me up, follow me, drop me a line, whatever you want to do, that's where you can find me. And until next time, you guys have a fantastic week and keep on playing.